Well, I have been married for 23 years. And one time, about 20 years ago, about the third year after our marriage, we went back to Birmingham, Alabama to spend a little vacation at the home of my wife. So while there, it was a beautiful time of the year, and there were beautiful red roses in the front yard and in the backyard. And I just kind of got a little sentimental and wanted to write a tune about, in honor, maybe, of Elizabeth, my wife. So it took me about 4 days to write out this little melody, and it was inspired by my wife.
Francis Craig serenades with Red Rose.
Everybody's just heard Red Rose, Francis Craig's theme song, and today is Francis Craig's, or would have been Francis Craig's, 100th birthday. And we have in our studios Donia Craig Dickerson, his daughter, and you might say, I guess, his successors, David Humphreys and Pat Patrick, two of Nashville's premier orchestra leaders, and of course Bill Baird, general manager and president of WAMB, and myself. We're very happy to be here with Donia on Francis's 100th birthday, and she can listen to his music all she wants because she never had an opportunity to dance for it. Donia, why was that?
Bill, Daddy wrote Near You when I was in the 8th grade at Palmer School. And the big thing in our lives, then you gentlemen will know this, was were the sorority and fraternity dances. They were the highlight of our year. And, of course, you pledge a sorority or fraternity when you are a freshman. So Daddy wrote Near You.
That's a freshman in high school.
High school. So my father wrote Near You when I was in the 8th grade, and then he retired. And the closest I got to dancing to my father's music was when we'd call them then spend the night parties. The big thing for us to do at a spend the night party was go to Bellmead Club and look in the window and see all the ladies in their beautiful dresses and the handsome men in their tux and see how they dance, and there we were just looking in the window. But I remember distinctly when Daddy would play Near You, people stopped dancing and would gather, I can see them right now, just gathering like bees around honey at the bandstand to hear Daddy play this unique song, Near You.
And also, as I said, in our studios, we have David Humphrey and Pat Patrick, just, I guess, to go in alphabetical order. David, welcome to our studios.
Well, thank you very much.
And I suppose it may not be too much to call either or both of you Francis Craig's successors, because you are the two dance bands in the city that seem to carry his banner more often.
And indeed, we've inherited a great tradition from him. The wonderful thing about playing in Nashville is that people remember him, and every time I'm compared to him, I learn something, and I also please folks.
Well, you can't beat that. And Pat Patrick, welcome to our studios.
Thanks, glad to be here.
And
Pat's got one of those unusual names where, you have the first and last name starting with the same letter, like Bunny Berrigan.
I didn't make it up. My mother thought that was cute when I was born, and it's worked out well.
Well, it has, that's right. And I've run on the same thing.
You got the same
that's
thing, right.
So it's easy to remember. In fact, somebody came into town one time at we used to have big band dancers downtown, and he was with Channel 2. And he said, you know what, I forget what his name was on the air. He said, you know what my real name was? And he whipped this out. And he said, Bill Baird. He says, but everywhere I go, there's already one before I get there.
I found that too.
Well, we're here today to, Donia, tell us another reason we're here today. Something's recently happened.
I think that your audience will enjoy this, Bill. Let me review and tell people that Daddy's memorabilia, the majority of the papers are at Vanderbilt Library in the special collections at the Jean and Alexander Hurd Library. And then the visual, so to speak, records, pictures, photographs, are in a case in the lobby at Blair. And I think this is appropriate for many reasons, particularly since Daddy was a Vanderbilt student. I'm a graduate. So many of my family went there. And in thinking about had I done things properly, I've been keeping care of Daddy's memorabilia since 1966 when he died, because Mother, lives in Sewanee, and she thought it was easy for it to be in Nashville. I get calls just constantly for sheet music or something or other. And I thought, now, have I done exactly what I should do, and is it complete, what I've done with the memorabilia? I got to thinking about the Library of Congress, and I was going to Washington taking an art group. So I phoned the proper person. It took a while. You know how the phones are now. At the Library of Congress, and got this very nice Mrs. Mary Blackman, and she is the curator of sound recordings. I told her who I was, and my mission was to present them an original of the 78 of the Bullet record of Near You, the 1947 record. And she said, thank you, and took some more information and said, now I'll be contacting you again. She called me later and she said, Miss Dickerson, you're not going to believe this, and thank you so much, but we have 36 records of Near You. We have 36 Bullet records of Near You. Well, I was just tickled to death and more than surprised. She, of course, then said, what might you have? And I then said, well, I would like to give you a CD and get you current in the technology. And my friend who with us today, Pat Patrick, compiled a CD for me, and I presented that to Mrs. Blackman. But then the next thing she said, you're going to want to talk to Mr. Raymond White, who's a music specialist. That's his title. And Mr. White will be contacting you. Mr. White was so interested in sheet music and any sort of paperwork that I had. I compiled sheet music. One I gave to them in Spanish. I don't know if you all know this, but Near You was recorded in 14 different languages. Isn't that interesting? And I got some photographs, some very pivotal photographs in Daddy's career, and then I gave them a copy of his entire scrapbook. So I had quite a suitcase with me when I went to the Library of Congress. And I'll tell you in a minute what it was like to go there. It was quite a thrill for my art people. My art group was really thrilled to be there. I told them it was an optional activity for the afternoon, and they said, what do you mean optional? We've never given anything to the Library of Congress. We're going right there with you. And of course, we all went together.
Well, Donia, before we go any further in our program, let's listen to Near You, since that's the course of our conversation right now. Nashville's #1 hit. I believe on the Billboard longer than anyone.
And it still holds that record, Bill. 17 weeks on the Billboard charts. The second record is Bing Crosby's version of White Christmas, I believe, was 14 weeks. Then we have one by the Beatles and one by Elvis. And Near You is still the #1, holds the #1 record. And someone told me yesterday, in connection with an interview about Daddy that, oh, Scare Your Father's in the Guinness Book of Records. Now, I didn't know that. I'm going to research that if he is wonderful.
Well, let's listen now and let everybody hear what it's like, and then we'll come back and talk some more.
Good, thank you.
Just one place for me near you. It's like heaven to be near you. Times when we're apart, I can't face my heart. Say you'll never stray more than just 2 lips away. If my life could be spent near you, I'd be more than content near you. Make my wish come true by telling me that you want to spend all your days near me.
We'll get back. Okay.
Okay, we have just heard Near You, and that was one of the Francis Craig renditions. We'll have several more throughout the day by other artists as we move along. And we were talking earlier, before we went on the air with David and Pat, about the dance scene of the 40s when Bill and I were coming along, and Donia followed shortly thereafter. And as a matter of fact, David was asking even what was a stag line. Well, that amused us. What do you see as the difference now between dances of today and dances of yesteryear?
What I noticed the most is that it is a much less formal affair. People come to a dance nowadays to relax. They don't dance as couples. They dance their own steps with each other. They are reluctant to dance with other people's partner, much more than I think it was in the 40s. We try to get people to do group dances when we play, and I'm always surprised that men are reluctant to dance with other people besides their dates.
Well, Pat, how do you find it?
Well, I've seemed to recently find that everybody is dancing together a little more. It seems
That
like
sounds good.
it seems like the revival of swing and Tony Bennett's success and all that has helped the romantic dancing return. I did notice the other night, very surprised that everybody got up, young and old, and danced to the swing music. And I mean, it was some people who were 85 and people who were 15. So I think that the resurgence of that of the big band music, and have brought people together to dance as a couple. But now I'm with David. When you get into the really boogieing, people do their own free forms, or in a group, or get them
What
in a
do they
group.
say? Boogie on down.
Boogie, yeah, they boogie down.
Well,
But
don't you notice too? Your orchestras will play the first hour a certain tempo and a certain age group will dance, and then you switch to another pattern of music, and all of them sit down, and somebody else comes up.
And that's the big challenge, is to try to invite everyone to participate without demanding that they do.
Well, it's a mystery to me sometimes, because I will watch y'all, and you start some tempo, and I'm telling you, people can't get on that floor quick enough. Now, we used to have it downtown at the big bands. We could play Dipsy Doodle in it, Memory, and the same thing happened with a different group of people. But something triggers a person.
there are magic songs,
Right,
and we kind of know what those are, and at what point to place them in the night. Sometimes you'll play them at a certain time of night, and you know that's going to draw a certain group to get out and dance, and they just can't sit still. I think that's, near use that type of that rhythm when it comes in with the piano lick in the beginning. All of a sudden everybody taps their toe, or they get ready to hit the dance floor. And there are those Glenn Miller songs we spoke of do the same thing. And there are a lot of those songs from the 50s and some of the disco songs, some of those will always work. People will get up. You can't sit still. You just can't. That's one reason I think Latin music is back. It's hard to sit still when you hear the Latin rhythms. And so it really, we do know some magic songs that will make them dance, just as you did back then.
Donia, tell us some more about your trip to Washington.
About the Library of Congress. The whole thing was fascinating. Of course, we went through a huge maze of security, which was good, and as it should be. We were greeted by Mrs. Blackburn and introduced to Mr. White, and we went in a very attractive room, very Washingtonian type room, and we, when I made the presentation, of course, they wanted a picture, and we stood up, both bills, in front of a just magnificent portrait of Fritz Kreisler. I'll have to tell you, I was thrilled. It was just a fabulous painting, and it was of Fritz Kreisler. And after we made the presentation, I'm speaking we is my wonderful art group with whom I was traveling. Miss Blackman took us through this long building and would stop when there were terribly important things for us to see. And for instance, we stopped in front of Rachmaninoff's desk in his chair, and if you think that wasn't a thrill, I've always been starstruck. But imagine Rachmaninoff's desk. It was just incredibly gorgeous piece of furniture. And then we went down, and Miss Blackman took out a key, and she said, "Now we're in the inner sanctum." And as you know, if you wanted to research a song or write a book or something, and you wanted to hear an original, if you lived in Washington or traveled to Washington, you would make an appointment. You can only have two, because Ms. Blackburn explained to us that people would spend the day if they didn't have a limit of appointments. You would request a record, and you would go in your cubicle, your sitting room, and then down below are the control rooms and the stacks of records. I'm here to tell you all, I have never seen as many stacks of records in mine. You cannot possibly envision the length of the stacks of the original 78s. Now imagine what they have in cassettes, and imagine now in CDs. Miss Blackman showed us where near you lived. It lived under B, of course, for Bullet Record. And this precious young jazz saxophonist, which I want to talk to you two about, named David, brought out the record, put it on the turntable, and played it. And my friends were just absolutely thrilled to death, of course. It was a really very thrilling experience. The Library of Congress is our nation's library. The reverence that they have for music and the displays and all would thrill all of you music lovers out there to know the seriousness of the archives of the music part of the Library of Congress, our nation's library.
Oh, I'm sure, and that sounds like a wonderful trip, a wonderful experience.
It was indeed.
It
was a memory.
Let's listen to a little more music. We heard your father's rendition of Near You. We've got Pat Patrick here with his own rendition of Near You, so let's listen to that. That's sort of the 1947. How did you record this, Pat?
95, I guess.
95. Well, it's almost, 40 years between the recordings. So let's listen to that one.
There's just one place for me, near you. It's like heaven to be near you. Times when we're apart, I can't face my heart. Say you'll never stray more than just 2 lips away. If my hours could be spent near you, I'd be more than content near you. Make my life worthwhile by telling me that I'll spend the rest of my days. Spend the rest of my days near you.
And since this is a music show, Bill, what do you think ought to come up next?
Well, we've got another good orchestra leader right here now, David Humphreys, and he's got 2 CDs out which are available at Cracker Barrel. And David, which one would you like to hear from that?
One of my favorites and everybody's is Mood Indigo.
Well, you got the right type composer, and I'm sure your
Yes,
arranger and your
indeed.
performance is good. So let's listen now to Mood Indigo by David Humphreys.
Here we go.
Well, David, that was that's a 1999. It's a 2000 arrangement.
Yes, indeed, but hopefully faithful to the original.
Yes, that's right. Somebody said one time no one could really play his music except himself, but that's not right. A lot of them know. I think they were thinking more of some of his real originals, up-tempo type of things. I know that the band sounded, but with Mood Indigo, Sophisticated Lady, things like that, everybody can play them and make them sound good.
We like to get next door to them if we can.
Right. Well, Bill, tell us what we're doing here today.
Well, today we're about at the half-hour mark, I guess, and it's time, I guess, to refresh our listeners or any latecomers coming in. Today would have been the 100th anniversary of Francis Craig, a Nashville legend, of course, and probably for the Southeast as you move down the line. And our guests around the table as we review Francis's music and the music of his successors, if you will, are Donia Craig Dickerson, his daughter, David Humphreys of Nashville Band Awareness, and Pat Patrick of Nashville Band Awareness. I hesitate to say fame in either case because I didn't want to embarrass one and not the other. And of course, Bill Baird is here, the general manager.
Tell them both, and then they embarrass them both.
David Humphrey and Pat Patrick of orchestral fame in Nashville. Bill, what's next on the agenda, do you think?
Well, we've been going around and playing something by everybody. Something we've never played on this station is Francis Craig's anything by his early recordings, like I understand 1925, 26. If you want to make a recording in Nashville, the big record companies like Victor, Columbia would go to Atlanta, Dallas, run a hotel suite, set up the recording equipment, and that's where the recordings were done, and they'd travel around doing that, both country and pop. And that your dad, Donia, went down to Atlanta in 1926. And we have one of those recordings. Do he ever speak to you about these early recordings?
The only thing that I remember so distinctly was he was so proud that the late James Melton, Jimmy Melton, as we call him, of Metropolitan fame, was playing the saxophone on him. And it's just so interesting to know that Mr. Melton went on to be a Metropolitan star, but he started with my father, and he was in his early 20s in this recording, and the sax is so distinct in this record. I think your listeners will enjoy this, and the tempo is just wonderful. You can just see them dancing.
Well, and I think something unusual too, and y'all, Pat and David, can think it's an arrangement. It's a lot of the early music. It's just sort of like everybody's playing, and then they get to the end and they quit. But you can hear one little section work, and then the other section work back and forth. And this is one that he did record in April of 1926 in Atlanta, and it's called That Florida Lowdown. Here's Francis Craig. Well, that's an early sound, 1926, Francis Craig and that Florida Lowdown. But that's all I was saying, Pat and David, that they did have an arrangement there, didn't they?
A real arrangement, not just everybody.
And Pat, you made an interesting observation about that this was sort of the transition from free-form Dixieland into organized big band arrangements.
Once the arrangement got organized at who's going to play when,
Yeah.
then you add the harmonies and additional horns, and you've got a big band.
Well, that gives us an early rendition of Francis Craig. It's before Bill and, well, I don't remember it. I was born, I think, about a year when that happened.
Well, I'm after you.
Donia, we're ahead of all of us in here. But it was an interesting, it's a clean recording, too. I was surprised how good it sounded. Something else we want to play on this piece is one of, the night that he made Near You. He did record other pieces of music. I think the union rules, and you could do 4 in one session, so same amount of money. So the 2 of them never really caught the public's attention. But I think one of them is good is it sort of gives a style of the Francis Craig Orchestra, a dance orchestra in 1947. It was a tempo, and then Bob Lamb, who sang on Near You, sings on this, and he also plays a trumpet solo. He wasn't a member of the trumpet section, but he did play solos. And so I thought maybe we could listen right now and listen to Francis Craig and his orchestra with Bob Lamb and Sometimes I Wonder.
Good.
True, or am I dreaming? Sometimes I wonder if this is real. When I touch your lips, there's such a thrill, believe me. I feel the warmth of your embrace all through the day. Sometimes I wonder if it's true, am I deserving of all the sunshine and skies of blue? You're my dream of dreams, my scheme of schemes, my inspiration too. Sometimes I wonder if heaven's you. Scheme of schemes, my inspiration too. Sometimes I wonder if heaven's you.
Well, there's Francis Craig and his orchestra, and Sometimes I Wonder, that came out of the first record session of the 4 songs, and that one kind of got lost because Near You was so popular that people didn't think about the other being there. Our guest today is Pat Patrick and David Humphreys, and we've got some of their songs too. Donia Dickerson, Francis Craig's daughter, is here with us today, along with Bill Baird and myself. And David, we want to play a song off of one of your new albums that you have that's available at the Cracker Barrel, and the Blues is the Night. Tell us about the song. I mean, you happened to hear it, you liked it, and...
It's a wonderful story. A wonderful musician and record producer here in town named David Humphreys. His father was a band leader and had lots of charts, original charts, from the 30s. And one of the charts in there was called a Talkies Medley, which was 4 songs that they would play over the radio from motion pictures in the 30s. And Blue is the Night was one of these. I had not been familiar with it. It's just enchanting, and everyone that hears it loves it from the word go.
Well, that's right. That's what it sounds like. And didn't you say that's what Cracker Barrel bought it from?
They heard our recording of that, and they said, make us a whole album just as good as this.
Well, that's great. That's so good. We've all got to hear it. This is a treat.
It's the old hotel sound, which I love so much.
And David Humphreys and the orchestra and the song Blues is the Night.
Blue is the Night.
Blue is the Night, right. Let's listen.
David Humphreys Orchestra and Blue is the Night. And you're right, it does have an enchanting hotel ballroom type sound.
Indeed.
Excellent. Donia, today being the 100th anniversary of your father's birth, and you're taking memorabilia up to the Library of Congress and the exciting adventures you had up there. Have you heard from them since?
Bill, in addition to very charming and very lovely thank you notes, I had a letter here again from Mary Blackman, who's the curator of sound recordings, asking if I might be willing to donate Daddy's ebony minstrel bones. Now, these, I don't know if people younger than I even know what they are, Bill. How many here know what they are? Everybody in this room, well, I think I better have a little lesson here, school teacher lesson. Bones, for you, those out there who don't know, were usually made of strong wood. Daddy's were beautiful ebony bones. And they, I'm going to say, are about between 6 and 8 inches long. They're slightly curved. The original idea would come from really bones from a real brooch, when people in the country would clean the bones, pick up 2 of equal length and start clapping them together. Then they became manufactured. They're really seldom seen now. But Daddy was just marvelous playing the bones, and his children in particular. If somebody would ask Daddy at home or at some party or something, some small occasion, would he play for us? If it really were a small occasion, he'd pull these bones, ebony bones, out of his pocket, and you've never heard such rhythm in your life. It's incredible how you can play these.
And also, too, they started out, you play the spoons. I think
Yes.
everybody has seen that.
They started at his spoons. Well, back to the Library of Congress, Mrs. Blackwood asked me would I be willing to contribute Daddy's ebony bones. And, of course, I said yes. They happened to be at Blair now, but Blair succumbed to the powers that be and said they would certainly be glad to give them up to the Library of Congress. And interestingly enough, they're going to go on the Bob Hope minstrel display, and I think that is so interesting. I'm gathering that they're hard to find, and that these being in perfect condition, that they would be more than happy to have them. So wouldn't that make Daddy proud? I think that's just a marvelous story. So up they're going to go to Washington.
Well, we're lucky, too, to have a recording that he did with these bones. I'd never heard it at the time until it was recently put on a CD.
This is the only time he ever performed with Red Foley, and of course that song, Alabama Jubilee, went to the top, and it's one of my favorite records.
Well, I noticed Red Foley says it's his second biggest seller, and Red sold a lot of records.
Yes, he did.
And to have that, how did you, Dad, do you know, did he just happen to be in the studio, or was he invited to come do that?
No, he was specifically invited to do it. He was so well known for the bones, and I just thank Mr. Foley's memory for having the desire to combine them, because this record, I think, is just really very exciting and very seldom heard.
And this was about what, you remember, 1950, 51?
I would say early 50s.
After he'd given his orchestra.
Yes. Oh, yes. No, because I remember I was real tickled that he was going to perform with Mr. Foley.
Well, let's listen to that song right now. Alabama Jubilee, Red Foley, and Francis Craig.
Good. Thanks.
You ought to see Deacon Jones when he rattles his bones. Old Parson Brown dancing round like a clown. Old Aunt Jemima, who's past 83, shouting out full of pep. Watch your step, watch your step. One-legged Joe dancing round on his toes, throws away his crutch and hollers, hey, let her go, oh, honey. Hail, hail, the gang's all here for the Alabama Jubilee. Mr. Francis Craig and his bones. See Deacon Jones rattle his bones. Old Parson Brown dance like a clown. Old Aunt Jemima, past 83, shouting out full of pep. Watch your step, watch your step. One-legged Joe, round on his toe, throws away his crutch and hollers, hey, let her go, oh, honey. Hail, hail, the gang's all here for the Alabama Jubilee.
Well, that's Francis Craig and Red Foley and the Alabama Jubilee, and Francis is playing the bones. Donia, as many dances as I went to in high school and in college where your father played, I never saw him pull out the bones or play them on any song. Did you? Occasion, did you see him a lot do this?
You know, Bill, now that you asked me, I never ever saw Daddy play the bones in public. It seems to me now it was maybe one of his special treats just for family, cousins, close friends there at home. Because in thinking back, every time I ever saw Daddy play the bones, it would be at some small private gathering. He maybe it was just his special treat for us. I don't know, but no one else ever seems to have heard him play. I'm so glad you played that record today for your audience.
Well, Red Foley must have heard him play somewhere to invite him to come and be on the recording.
Yes.
And so maybe he did it in private with some of his musician friends.
Well, I do remember that when Mr. Foley invited Daddy to record with them, I was so proud that that he would be with Mr. Foley, and it was just this record was also number one.
Well, that's a treat today, and it's nice to know that you have the bones now deposited in Washington for good safekeeping and for the memory. You said it was going to be in the Bob Hope?
Well, this is what I've been told. I hope I'm not preempting. Well, certainly I don't. Do we carry this far to Washington today?
Yeah, we'll get there.
What we ought to do is send him a copy of the show.
We're on the internet. It goes around the world.
Absolutely. No, I'm very proud of this, and they're in excellent condition. And I would venture to say there are really not many bones around. Do you know I've never seen any in any music case in any music museum. Now that we're speaking of this.
So either. Mm-hmm. Well, today, Bill, we have. Tell us who our guest are.
Once again, if you tuned in late, we're very pleased to have on today the occasion of Francis Craig's 100th birthday at the anniversary of his birth. We have with us Donia Dickerson, who is Francis's daughter, and David Humphreys and Pat Patrick, leading lights in the orchestral scene in Nashville. And I want to ask them a question. We've talked about where dancing was back in the era of the big band. My question, and I was talking to Bill about it the other day, where is it going? Anybody? David?
Great question, Bill.
That's a tough one. I wish we knew.
If we knew, we'd write a book, wouldn't we? I'm the touchy-feely part of music, I think, needs to come back because what everyone sees on the internet and video and MTV, that's all gotten so sophisticated. It's also isolated everybody from the direct experience of music, and I think people will crave some kind of closer touch with the actual music, and I hope to be there when they do.
No, I think that live music is coming back big, and people, you really, after a full dose of the virtual music or whatever, hearing it live is pretty awesome. I have young people who come and stand in front of the horn section with their drop in their mouth when they hear those harmonies of the big band and all those saxophones playing. They've never heard that. They've heard plenty of guitars and drums and
they've never seen that many people together working together.
Yeah, and playing that. Yeah, they're used to a smaller group, and they can stand right there in front of it and hear those horns and all those harmonies, and they really get excited. It's exciting to me to see them respond that way. And then of course I think I'm with you that people are going to dance together more and more. I think they're wanting that experience.
When we have our dances, which we do maybe once a year, if we have a good place to hang our hat, we are seeing more and more young people at our dances, and we sponsored these dances at the Centennial Park this past summer, even as hot as it was. A number of young people came out to be there, as well as some of the older crowd, and some lady came up every night and asked if they would play a waltz for her, a Viennese waltz. And at that one night when I was there, I've forgotten whose orchestra it was, said she would be here if we would play waltzes all night long.
Oh.
But
right. Some people do want waltzes.
Well, I continue to be amazed about Sing, Sing, Sing. It speaks to people directly in a primal way. I wish I knew 100 more songs just like Sing, Sing, Sing.
Well, we were talking about, and both of you were discussing the dance and the slow dancing. We didn't say slow, but dancing together. Both our guests have CDs out. We've played a couple of songs by David. Pat, you've got on one of the CDs you brought in, and I guess this would be a good selection to bring the point out about dancing called The Wee Small Hours?
Well, this was a great song, and we had done just a guitar vocal version for a while with Bill Davidson, who sung and worked with me for years, a Nashvilleian, who remembers certainly. In fact, and there's a picture of his mother and father with your dad, I know, at your house. And so we decided, on one of those sessions, let's go ahead and do an arrangement of it. And Bob Mader, who's a great drummer in town, and said, well, I've got an arrangement. Let's do this Wee Small Hours with my arrangement. Turned out great. There's some great horn solos, and it's very romantic.
Well, let's listen and see how romantic.
In the wee small hours of the morning, when the whole wide world is fast asleep, you lie awake and think about the girl and never give a thought to counting sheep. When your lonely heart has learned its lesson, you'd be hers if only she would call in the wee small hours of the morning. That's the time you miss her most of all. Has learned its lesson, you'd be hers if only she would call in the wee small hours of the morning. That's the time you miss her most of.
And that was a number, Pat. Thanks a lot for even bringing the album for us to play. You've told the story about it, and I think it's unusual. Well, Donia, we're about to have to wind down here. What are your thoughts on this 100th anniversary of your father's birth?
Bill, I'm glad you asked me that. I think the main thing that goes through my mind is that my father died in 1966, and here we are in the year 2000. And do you know, Bill, that there's rarely a day that goes by that somebody somewhere doesn't either ask me something about my father, or I get a call for a copy of the sheet music, or someone will stop me on the street and tell me about their happy memories, or somebody in a younger generation will have lunch at the Hermitage Hotel and ask who was Francis Craig. You know, his name is still there with his engagement dates. And I think it's just such a beautiful story that someone right here in Nashville, before we were Music City, USA, gave us this wonderful standard love song, and the memory's still so alive today. It's just a wonderful feeling.
And you said he died in 66?
1966, yes.
That's 34 years ago.
Yes.
One thing that strikes me, Donia, between your father's birth and Bill's mother and my mother were all born in the same year. So they were all contemporaries at 1900. And now here we are at 2000.
And here we are.
And we gathered, if you remember, a year ago, we came in thinking it was his 100th birthday, but we had a great program on his 99th
we
birthday.
Did. Well, we did. It was the 99th, and I think we had it in our mind. I'm sure it's my fault, but I think I had it in my mind it was his 100th year. But we had a great broadcast. And, Bill, I'd like to thank both Bills. I hope you all know how much your audience appreciates what you do for the music industry here and everywhere. You do so much, and it's so warm and so sincere, and you bring back, you just give us what we want to hear, and I hope you know how much your listeners truly appreciate what you do.
That's a nice compliment.
Well, I get
Thank
phone
you
calls
so much.
constantly every time I'm here, and I also, every time someone hears just any of my father's music, just day to day, people call, they're so thrilled. It's just so wonderful.
Well, thank you. That's a real sincere thank you very much.
Well,
and we want to play also on the day show before we close up your father's other great hit, almost went to the heights of Near You. How do you know anything about Beg Your Pardon? You give us a little story about that.
This is darling. I can tell this because Daddy said it on himself. He continued to write, and he really had no idea that Beg Your Pardon would ever do anywhere near what Near You did. But Beg Your Pardon, as you know, was #1 on the charts. He laughed to himself and would call it Near You Backwards, and we just had a marvelous family time talking about Near You Backwards. That he did make it to the charts again. It was just it's a wonderful song, and people still remember the lyrics to that too.
Well, that's right, and it's a catchy tune.
It's a catchy tune also, very catchy.
So
very
let's
catchy.
all listen to Francis Craig. This is, I believe I'm correct, this is made about 6 months after Near You.
That's
as
correct.
a follow-up for the hit of Near You.
Exactly.
So here's Francis Craig again, Bob Lamb, and Beg Your Pardon.
I
And there it is, the successor to Near You, Beg Your Pardon. Donia, I guess everybody in the city knows the words to Near You, old and young.
They do. I've got a darling story, Bill. I exercised at the Easter Seal Center on Woodmont. And one of the young lifeguards there had heard that my father was a musician, and she said she wanted to hear the music. So I took a cassette that Pat had compiled for me, and she had it there on the lifeguard stand and was playing it. One of the ladies in the class, and mind you, I'm the youngest one in the class, boys, said, "Oh, wait just a minute, we want to all hear that." So the lifeguard turned it up, and I wish you could have seen the entire swimming pool filled with ladies my age, and I'm 68 and a lot older. Everyone, I'm just singing to the top of their voice, "Near You" in the swimming pool. It was the cutest thing you've ever seen. Both Pat and David said that's a video. You said that's a video. I called up Cal Turner, who gave the money for the East. I said, "Cal, you've done a lot for a lot of people, but you don't know what you've done for the ladies in your swimming pool." We sang "Near You" all in unison. It was just one of my best memories.
Well, it's been a good memory being here with you today, Donia.
Thank you.
Bill, tell us about what everybody's heard today.
Well, we've certainly had an afternoon, Bill, starting with the Francis Craig's Near You and going all the way through to Beg Your Pardon, and in between with his successors, Pat Patrick and David Humphreys. It's just incredible how it seems to bring together even over all of these years. And our guests, of course, are David Humphreys, Pat Patrick, the successors to Francis Craig and the big band scene in Nashville, and of course Donia Craig Dickerson. Donia, thank you for being with us, and Bill, thank you for putting the show on.
Well, it's been great, and it's been nice to have, besides Donia, because we've had her on other shows, but to have Pat and David with us today.
Sure.
Let's keep dancing, folks.
That's right. It's good to hear them in person, but it's good to know them in person and discuss some of these stories. Maybe someday on your 100th birthday,
Right. We'd
you
love
might
to come
have
back.
a story
We'd love
somewhere.
to come
back. Love to come back.
Well, let's go out.
Thank you all so much. I just want to be able to say thank you again.
Well, Donia, thank you. And there's a new recording, a relatively new recording, the last 2 or 3 years of Near You by a big band in Canada called the Spitfire Band. They, of course, get their name from the squadrons of the RAF during World War II, but they've got a new recording of Near You, so let's play that as we all go out and say thank you all again for being with us, and we'll look for you another time.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Okay.